I'd like to call this meeting of the Coventry Municipal Fire Commission to order at 6:08 PM. Roll call, Hillary Lima, present. John Paul Verducci,
Here.
Lieutenant McCann,
Here.
Captain McAloon, Russ McGilvery, Peter Rondo,
Yeah.
Jillian Weinmiller, Daniel Perillo, Robert Savetti, Stephen Angel, Chief Heiss. Let me see, 1, 2. We do have a quorum. At this time, please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. In the event of an emergency, those present this evening can exit outdoors labeled number 1 or 2 in the back of Town Hall to the front lawn or back parking lot of Town Hall. Meeting minutes from prior meetings, we have 2 sets this evening, March 13th, 2025 and May 22nd, 2025. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from March 13th?
Motion approved.
Motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Any abstentions? Nays? All right.
I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
2 abstentions for the record from Verducci and Angel. And the motion passes. May 22nd, 2025, do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion on these minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. 1 abstention. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Public comment on docketed items. Those items on our agenda this evening, come forward to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, please. Public comment, members of the public on Zoom, public comment on docketed items only. Please unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record.
Hello, Robert Heavey, 607 Weaver Hill Road, Coventry.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Hi, it's a general comment about docketed items and the meeting format in general. And it's really a request for everyone that is speaking to be aware of where the microphone is so that those of us on Zoom can hear you. Today, even the votes and the roll call were difficult to hear. In the last meeting, there were whole sections that were completely inaudible.
Fair point. Definitely make sure that we stick to microphones more. Looks like we have a microphone to every person here today, I believe. So thank you. Well pointed.
Thank you.
Public comment on docketed items on Zoom. Please raise your hand to be let in. Public comment going once, twice. Oh, yep, go ahead. Just make sure the microphone is green. State your name and address for the record, please.
Stephen Bosque, 8 Raven Boulevard, Coventry, Rhode Island. I just have a question, not so much a document. Will there be an opportunity to ask questions about things that are going to be discussed? Like, I find this as an awkward setup because I'd rather wait for discussions on some of the topics, and I may have questions at that point. I don't have any at this time.
Yeah, I'm happy to ask the membership to add a public comment at the end if you'd like.
Thank you.
Yep. Public comment going once. Yes.
If you're going to allow public comment at the end, leave public comment open.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Moving to new business. We've got a couple items this evening. We docketed legal considerations. We've had these up as a question for a bit. We've been accumulating these. We've been talking about the pre-existing chief contracts within some of the districts, the taxing authority of the districts, and what happens if the town charter or the town chooses to establish a fire department. We've had questions about whether a town-wide referendum is required, what enabling legislation may be required, with any action taken and what additions would be needed to be made to the charter or town code with any establishment, say of a municipal fire department. So, Solicitor Angel, the floor is yours.
So I'm going to start with the taxing authority of the districts. So essentially, there would need to be legislation at the state level, which would call, in addition to other things, call for the extinguishment of the taxation authority of the districts. Right now, the districts, by state law, have an ability to levy taxes if there were to be a municipal department. And by the way, what I say here, we will fold in a written explanation into whatever the report of this commission is. But I wanted to talk in some broad terms and answer questions that the group had or get input before we do that. So the taxing authority of the districts would be abolished. The town would then have the right to, as part of its levy, to include a taxation component. Some cities and towns break out the part of the on the tax bill, what goes for schools, what goes for fire, what goes for police. It might be wise in this case to give folks, as you move forward, to give folks a sense of that. It's not terribly difficult to do those things. There would be some other legislation at the state level, without getting into particulars on that. We don't really need to at this point because this is a ways off. I mean, this group has to make a recommendation to the council, and ultimately it's the council's decision to decide to go forward. If the council decides to go forward and it decides to do so for the next fiscal year, or to begin this in the next fiscal year in some fashion, that state legislation would necessarily need to be pre-filed in December. When I say pre-filed, the session starts on January 1st at the General Assembly, and it ends on the 30th of June, typically. It doesn't go past June 30th because the fiscal year begins on July 1st. As part of that, you want the bill heard as soon as possible. Usually you can get local bills heard early. I'm sure that will make the administration very happy because they would want to know how this figures into their budget for that fiscal year, if that's what you intend to do. And not this group, but if that's what the council intends to do. So we'd want to get it filed early. That would mean that all of the economic and financial analysis would need to be done before you file those bills, because you will necessarily get questions at hearing in the General Assembly with respect to, what this means for the town, what it doesn't mean for the town. Your tax rate and your tax levy would look different next year. In whatever year you do it in, it would look different. And it would appear on the surface that the municipality would exceed the state cap of 4%, which it probably would not. It would be a journal entry of sorts, but nevertheless, you'd have to go to the State Division of Municipal Affairs, and you would have to get it approved, and you would have to discuss with them what the numbers are, how much of the over 4% is as a result of accreting in the additional taxation component related to the fire districts. When I say additional taxation component, I'm not suggesting, by the way, that there's a whole new tax, because obviously if you abolish the taxation authority of the districts, you're automatically going to absorb that particular taxation component into your budget. And if there is a difference between what you're collecting and what you need to run the department, then it's that delta that would necessarily need to be budgeted for. But that's really up to finance, and that's a greater discussion. But I raise it in the context of filing legislation at the state level, because these are questions that will need to be answered in committee hearings before a bill goes to the floor and gets voted on. We would also want to make sure that there are companion bills that are filed, one in the Senate, one in the House. It would be identical. If those bills are amended, we need to make sure that the companions are amended appropriately. For those, it's kind of a shame today. Nobody gets a traditional civics or government education in schools. So here's one for you, for those who don't know. When you have companion bills, it's necessary to have the bills match. Assuming that those bills go through their respective committee processes, they then report out to the floor of the respective chambers, they get voted on. Assuming that they pass, the bills that pass literally go across the hall to the desk of the other chamber, and then are voted on in that chamber and vice versa. And that's how it goes. And then the bill itself does not become law until either the governor signs it or until the governor fails to sign it and there's a 10-day lapse, and then the bill automatically becomes law without the governor's signature, unless, of course, the governor vetoes the bill. So that's generally how it works. So it is a bit of a process, and I would think that the municipality would want that to happen before your budget process is final. Otherwise, it's meaningless, right? So that's that issue at the state level. When you talk about charter language, the town does have the right to have a municipal fire department. It says that be necessarily part of the public safety complex, if you will. There would certainly need to be a section of code created with respect to a fire department, much like you have for your police department. And that would need to be passed into law at the local level. There's a question of whether or not you would need a townwide referendum to establish a fire department. You don't. Okay. Your charter gives you the right to do it, in my opinion. And that's not unusual, by the way. It's not unusual. And we'll give you more detailed and specific advice on that as we move forward. Taxing pre-existing contracts of the chiefs within the district. I don't know as we stand here, and it's a personnel matter, so I don't want to get into individual contracts, okay? I don't know what those contracts look like. I don't know what the willingness to serve of chiefs would be, and a head role or a deputy role and that kind of thing. But certainly if they have a contract and you're going to take on those contracts, one thing you cannot do is take away pay and benefits. You can't do that. And you'd necessarily have to look and see what the nature of the contract is in terms of what does the employment agreement itself say. And we're not going to get into that in this forum. Similarly, you would look at other contracts as well, without getting into specifics on contracts. Because I know that there are OMA rock throwers who regularly listen to these meetings. In general, those contracts would be novated, and you would have one contract for your municipal fire personnel, both firefighters, EMS, and the like. And much like your police department, you would have a contract, a CBA for your support staff. So it's the same sort of setup. Other questions that I can answer based on these items?
Anyone, members of the commission? So you said you have a write-up of this already. We can
Yep, we'll
include
have
it
that
for the.
for you as part of the report.
Okay. All right. No one has any questions, then I guess we're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. JP, this next item you had asked for, and if you wanted to the discussion on. Yeah, we talked about
Yeah.
that a lot.
So we did briefly mention this at the last one. So just looking to get a general sense from everyone, what we feel would be best to present to the town council as a whole. Look just at the dates. We've got about a month left here. So I just wanted to be real clear that, for anybody who's either watching this process or us as a part of it, that we do intend to show the whole picture of things, so to speak. So for instance, the kind of discussion I wanted to get was what options in particular would be helpful, do you think, as far as both, who gets combined with who or doesn't, and, just to show the whole picture. Once we have all the baseline numbers, it'll be somewhat easy to, move some parts here and there, but I just wanted to kind of hear from everybody what they thought about what those options should look like. Obviously, there'll be a financial component and there'll be, certain restrictions on the phasing in of that just based on, what the town has available. And that's all going to be generated from the personnel for the most part. And then, we'll get into the particulars, but just wanted to kind of hear from everybody what they thought would be useful.
Comments are easy. I'll go first if that's okay. Unless it's a municipal department, I will not give an opinion on a fire district model of any kind, because that's not my role here. My role is strictly to advise the town for town-side issues. So as it would pertain to a municipal fire department, I'll certainly render an opinion, but I will not as to fire districts. So I don't have a particular opinion, nor do I think my opinion counts with respect to a fire district model.
I also think that we can include in the report, what the pros and cons are of the different models, whether it's Westerns alone and the Easterns combine, or it's a single district, or Westerns by itself and the rest goes municipal, or it's municipal. But however, the town council has no way to wave a wand and tell the districts what to do if it's not municipal. At the end of the day, that's up to the districts. So that's at the end of the day, whatever's given to the council, it really only has two options. It's either you want to explore adding a department, or you're saying, you know what, we're not dealing with this, quite frankly. So that's what just needs to be kept in mind when those other options are put into a report. We can't tell the districts what to do. They don't report to us.
So at the end of this process, it may be that this group offers, that could be a potential option. It's here's how far we've come. Here's what we found going this route. Do you want to explore more? Or
Well,
okay.
we found, I think, some bedrock here of what the town needs in terms of the number of personnel and what apparatus need to be on the road, what the capital needs are, okay, which I don't think wildly change whether, based on municipal versus whatever the districts choose to do. I think the facts are the facts, but it's really one of two paths when the town council needs to decide what it wants to do with the information. In my opinion, what you're sharing with the council on July 22nd, I don't anticipate, obviously, the council's not going to make any decisions. I would imagine the council's going to say, all right, here's questions I still have, and then come back to the commission to answer those.
Because some of the answers we're not going to have. So just to follow up on the next part of the agenda. So we did speak to the people from MERS, who they did advise the director and I that they can do a study for us, a blended study of what it would look like for a municipal department. And they would also add the Western people, if we're able to get the demographics of the Western people, to put into one municipal fire department if we were to do that. So that's about a $10,000 to $12,000 study, and it's about 6 to 8 weeks. So if that's something that this commission wants to do, I don't know how we would fund that. Council approval to move forward.
Have to be part of the report to the council
Okay.
saying that if you'd like more information about the fiscal
Ah,
impact,
okay.
the town council would need to authorize that analysis and the funds to do so.
So that's just one thing that, like you said, we're not going to have all the answers come July 20th.
Oh, no, that's clear. But we need
Alright.
to report into the council and say where we're at.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, or JP, any more thoughts?
No, that makes me feel a lot better because I was just seeing that month coming up, and that sets the stage for me to chill out a little bit on that. So we're not having to force something down in a month, so that's good.
It's a two-tiered decision. It's the fiscal impact, and then it's the council, and then it's a political decision. So,
Is this commission potentially being extended if the town council does have, because I think that what formed us ends on the July 22nd as well, so we would need an extension.
yeah, I think the town council on this 22nd saying it has additional questions or work of the committee. I believe it can continue. I don't know that yeah.
Just to be clear, the commission has the right to extend its work and its deadlines. The resolution doesn't expire like, the resolution creating this commission does not cause the commission to expire like Cinderella at midnight on July 30th. So,
All right, anything else on that one? Okay. We talked, yeah,
Have we discussed on who's going to replace somebody from the Anthony? We found anything with that yet?
they just put in,
not talk about this is not.
oh, yeah, good
All right,
point.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, my bad. Yep.
All right. Bob, did you want to go over the sample budget that you put at everybody's spot?
Yeah, so based on the discussion last meeting, we had different scenarios going around, and I know on the agenda it had talked about 54 and 62, but I believe, again, there were a lot of numbers passed around. I think we said, well, 54 is not really 54, it's more like 57 when you add in the 2 fire marshals plus the chief. And then same thing with the 62, if we were looking at 16 per, I don't know, was it shift? So 16 per shift really brought you up to 64, and then you add those other 3 positions. So that's why what I put in front of you actually shows 57 and 67. Like every budget or projection, it's a projection. These numbers are not exact 100%. You know, you look at the different contracts, excuse me, and the personnel, you know, compensation's different throughout. So just at the top, I show you what I was utilizing. So the salary amount includes stipends and longevity, because in a couple of contracts, it does include a stipend and longevity, whereas like the Central Coventry Fire District, there is no stipend and longevity. So that's why the first couple positions, when you see division chief or assistant and fire marshal, I used the CCFD amounts because those were the highest compensation, but then we added in there the amounts for the stipend and longevity, assuming those were to carry. So that's how we came up with the salary, including stipend and longevity amount, the holiday compensation. Again, I think based on the contracts that's out there, there was 12 hours compensation, 11 holidays per year. So that's just how that's calculated. So then we went down by positions, and again, based on discussions, and I'm open, obviously, we can revise this based on the, you know, the firefighters that are here. Obviously, you have more knowledge of this than I do. But I believe the positions we talked about having 4 division chiefs, 8 captains, 8 lieutenants, 2 fire marshals, the chief, which leaves the remaining 34 as firefighters. I put in here the firefighters, again, contracts are all different, but assuming the firefighters are all over the 30-month category, so, you know, for employment, so the ones that are at the highest level.
We're pretty close to that now.
So again, just calculates the annual salary, clothing allowance is put in there. Again, I believe the highest clothing allowance per contracts was 1,600 annually, so that's what's put in there for the number of firefighters or number of positions. Estimated payroll tax is simply the FICA and Medicare, although I believe one of the departments may not participate in Social Security, but this assumes they all would participate in Social Security. Estimated pension, at the bottom of the page, you can see the rates that are currently published by MERS, by the State Retirement System, for fiscal '27. So just tried to use based on a blended rate, came up with 34.09%. Life insurance contracts, again, there's one contract, I believe, that says firefighters are entitled to $250 payment per year, so that's what's factored in there. Estimated PHP, which is post-employment health plan, is factored at 1% of the compensation. Again, it's an estimate. Some people currently grandfathered in are receiving more than that 1%, but everybody hired after a certain date is at the 1%, so an estimate. And then health and dental insurance assumes every employee that's listed is going to be taking a family plan. And again, that's an estimate based on the current price of those family plans. So you have the total payroll and benefits, the average, then just an average per position, what each position's costing. So you see at 57 positions, the estimated total payroll and benefits roughly 8.7 million. And at 67 positions, total payroll and benefits roughly 10.1 million. And then, we would factor that, obviously, rolling that into an entire budget, which we can look to put together. As we all indicated at one of the previous meetings, I believe Brian put something together that showed, you wouldn't have a need for the audits, the treasurer's positions, tax collector positions. So it would be a very rough estimated budget, but at least I think this is, the initial discussion on the personnel coming in at 57, or do you go to 67? And then ultimately, the discussion was, ideal situation would be able to get up to an 89 personnel in the department, which would actually phase in over a number of years. But I think this was the starting point that was discussed.
Comments or questions?
One question for you. So is it safe to say that this is conservatively high? Yeah, I mean, this is maxed out as much as it can. If we're looking for fully loaded costs, as far as when we push this into a real budget, we're conservatively bad as far as at least what the ad would be.
I think so, based on my initial reading of the contracts, but again, some of the districts, I'm not familiar entirely with their contracts, and actually, one of the the contract, I didn't even see where it talked about the compensation. It just indicated there was a percentage pay raise plus different increases in stipends, but it never gave the initial compensation. But I would say yes, I think this is more on the conservative end.
Bob, obviously this is just personnel, so personnel usually consumes what, 80% of a budget in general? 85%?
Maybe a little bit less, because here you're not factoring in any overtime, right? So we're not factoring in overtime with the numbers we're looking at here. With the fire districts, you have fire hydrants, which is a significant expense, street lighting, which is a significant expense. So off the top of my head, maybe it's a 75% versus the 80 to 85%, but I'd have to look at.
Rough estimate I've heard, I've seen of a total budget is around 12. Am I in the right ballpark?
You are, as we started this off, we were right around 12.5 million.
Yeah, I think I did start looking at roughly, budgets, and you're right, at the 57 staff level, and again, estimating what overtime can be, obviously, that's a factor that you have on the job injury, a lot of different things could impact that number. But you're right, I'm at about 12.6 for a staff of 57, and a staff of 67, I think you're at about 14.3 million.
Steve, you.
Very rough numbers.
Yeah, just a budgeting question. Obviously, there's other expenses related to the operations of the department. Well, capital expense, buildings, maintenance, is that something that would be built out separate somewhere else in the budget, or would it be part of theirs?
No, I think I'm sorry, Hillary. Yeah, I think the next step would be if the way we're laying out this entire staffing, if it's accurate, again, with the input from the firefighters on the committee, if that's considered accurate, then we need to roll up the budget. And again, I think we would start with what Brian originally put together, or even obtaining the most recent budgets that every district's operating under, and just trying to pull that together, knowing that some of the things are going to be eliminated.
Just to remind me, what was our current filled FTEs all in right now? I know we have some people out. Was it
You say on budgeted or current?
filled? Yeah,
Budgeted or filled?
filled,
Okay.
roughly. I mean,
23.
Yeah, I don't want to
and
start doing that again.
8, like 6 to 8. With the chief.
Is it 52 actively that we're talking about? How many people currently?
Mm.
Currently filled.
Oh, wow. $48, I thought.
So I had
48?
48 and a half.
48.
Really going through all.
Yeah. No, just, okay. All right, thank you.
49.
Yeah, just wanted to keep it for, comparison purposes. Thank you.
So is it reasonable for the next meeting on the 10th to pull together the budget option between? Okay,
Yeah, I think we could pull it together. What I'd like to do is try to, pull something together and then maybe circulate it to some of the chiefs in each department to say, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
And I think we need some of their input. I know Central's in the process right now. We're going through the budget for next year. I think Weston just approved their budget a couple months ago. Anthony
Anthony's
District's
not
in the
till
middle, right?
November.
Yeah.
Anthony's November annual meeting.
So, I think I could certainly get something together ahead of that meeting and circulate it to even everybody on the committee to try to take a glance at it before then. if
Yeah.
That's what you like.
Yep.
Would it be possible to get the total levy to even just big picture wise for revenue sides, or at least what we're collecting between all four, just to see the
Based on the
difference?
budget, what it would change?
Yeah, just to, okay, you have that. And then what would be more helpful during that exercise? Does it make sense to include everyone's budget as is and not start combining duplicative, services as we go through it? So we want to see what everybody has budgeted
We've
for.
already chopped that.
You did that
Yep,
already. All
yep,
right, so
Calculation of buying,
Okay.
here's what would be away.
still catching
We
up.
talked about IT and how we need to add IT staff anyway. So we've done, yeah.
Or we could, we
So
could
you-
certainly get a copy of everybody's current budget that's in place. and-
Right. Okay. So this one would be the combined. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. So you
What
already
we're
did
trying to do is to eliminate some of those
that.
positions.
So that'll already. Okay.
It was like 680,000 and change of duplicative services. Roughly, something like.
So that would be out of when we do. So we got personnel, we'll do the operating. That'll be out of the operating already. Okay. Thank you. Understood.
So how does it work with the budget, the timeframes? Everyone has a different fiscal year. So where do you start with that?
Yeah, again, I think that goes to legal question and, with the legislation, when it's gonna get approved. My thought would be that if it did get legislatively approved, I don't think you could bring it in, again, just my own personal opinion, until July 1 of 27. Because I think right now you have districts, so Central's about to go forward to the taxpayers to approve a budget in September. That budget's gonna run from September 1 through August 31st. And if this were to roll in effective July 1 of 26, essentially the central taxpayers are being billed twice for July and August. So I think they would need to, again, just my own opinion, I think they would need to know ahead of time so that September of 26, when a budget's being presented, it's only a 10-month budget and not a 12-month budget, which gets them to June 30th.
Anything else from the committee on this piece?
So on that budgeting item, right, for your budget year, is it possible, and this is be a question for Mr. Angel, can you, going forward, because we're new to this, right? We'd have to probably check with towns that have gone over this already, as far as that process of changing their budget. Look at East Granite, they only had one budget anyway. With that, is it possible that you can do not a full budget cycle, but like a 6-month, just to try and line everybody up?
Yeah, so when it happened, I was involved with the Lincoln Fire District when Salesville and Albion merged. And again, there was a 2-year period when this took place with legislative approval and it got extended. And Salesville, before the merger, they passed a 10-month budget because their budget ran from, January 1, it was a calendar year, whereas they assumed a fiscal year of November 1 to October 31st. So that last year, they did approve a 10-month budget.
Chairman Bosque?
Hi, Steve Bosque, 8 Mile, I'm sorry, I don't think my old address, 8 Raven Boulevard, Coventry, Rhode Island. I do have one question, only because I don't know. So a staff of 57, what does that put at each station? Is that still 8 at Flat River, at Station 7, 8?
I think we've talked about that before. I think operationally wise, that would have to be, come up and sit with the chief that you hire. If
Right,
the-
I just-
the i-
but-
The idea would be to try and get as much staff and send to town.
Right, but I was just looking at, because of the projections, one of them was a 57 number, and I didn't know if someone, so if they went through and figured 57, what does 57 actually look like? Because I don't know, I mean,
Going to get into staffing, it's a separate topic. We're here to talk about budgets and what's on the agenda.
Yeah,
If you're going to staff
Okay.
stations,
we, yeah.
okay,
don't
because
want-
she has the staffing, that you passed out, that was my only question on that. I think I already know the answer to the question, but Attorney Angel had mentioned that they don't need to have a town referendum. And I get that when you read the charter. But this section of the charter does say before they buy any equipment, they're supposed to have a vote townwide approved by the taxpayers before any equipment, fire trucks, anything is that waived because of the charter change a few years ago? I guess is my question.
What provision are you referring to about the vote for the
Well,
purchase?
uh,
The citation on that one?
yeah, I might have just left that. Hold on one sec. I think it's section 3 of the Article 3 for fire departments, the 1947.
Article 3 is
Yep.
town council. So what,
It says that the town council is authorized to make a purchase from time to time as deemed necessary, essential for the proper running of a fire department, provided however, that no purchase of a fire engine, pumper, hook, or ladder truck, fire station, or land of which the build, the station shall be made unless a financial town meeting of said town shall be first appropriated for the money thereafter, therefore.
We don't have town meetings anymore, so.
Right, so that was my
So it's,
question.
you know, we've got a lot of conflicts within the charter that I'm sure we'll point out on this.
trying to seat people on that commission, Steve.
And so the other thing is, also on the charter, the Attorney Angel had mentioned about abolishing the taxing of districts, but the charter also says that taxing authority should be remain for any sort of collecting liabilities that are owed to the districts, that the districts don't dissolve, they're still there. They still have a ability to collect funds of money that is owed according to the charter. It also says for things that have been approved, or if they've made changes to their charter for services that have been approved by the state. So I just question on that, because nobody mentioned about dissolving taxing authority, but there's still,
Through the chair, so the answer to the question is that when and again, we have this discussion a lot in Coventry about, you know, everyone thinks that the charter is, you know, like the Magna Carta, right? It's not. When the General Assembly acts and creates an act of the General Assembly in a general law, it overrules and preempts a charter provision to the contrary, existing now or in the future. So the legislation at the state level would necessarily address all of those items. That would certainly be the intent of the state legislation, would be to address all of those items.
okay, that's, I think, the only other question I had right now anyway, as far as, was the staffing left or not, can't touch that. That's all I got. Thank you.
While you're up here, though, I know one of your sticking points was around the cost per position.
Yep.
To get your feedback on what you're seeing here and where you fall.
I don't, without really digging down into it, you're showing the average, I mean, depends on the number of positions, I guess.
I know you had you took.
Right. Right, because I was looking.
Brian's numbers.
When I was looking at the numbers that Brian had posted as far as, and actually, if you go to each town's individual budget, you see the number of FTEs and how much they spent on the same sort of line item. I said, I think Anthony's was their average for their station, what they budgeted for was 161,000 per FTE. Central's was higher, it's around 165 or so per FTE. Ours is much lower. So that's where the adjustment, when I was talking, when we were speaking before, the adjustment of trying to figure out our staffing level when you're, yes, we're more than equivalent of 8 FTEs right now. If we do it at about $1 million, it comes out to a lot less per FTE because we're filling it with per diems and other people when we need to try to avoid hopefully overtime, or if someone's out, or whatever we can do to try to keep things going, but we can put more people on. So I know that is a concern as far as if we're gonna be staffed at 8, and if Flat River's only staffed at 8, Western will actually have less coverage in its force than they presently will have in the future. I think Hopkins Hill was a little bit lower FTE wise than the other 2 districts, so whatever contract we'll go through will probably bump them up a little bit. But I'll take the numbers that they have, because having more firefighters,
Assuming the max of.
right, and having them, and they're at a lower FTE. I mean, they're at 146 versus the 160, that I was looking at. But then the folding in of whatever other positions, like I said, you've got to decide what you're going to do with contracts of the existing chiefs, or how they're going to get folded into a position or bought out, or whatever happens.
At the last meeting, I wish you were there. We accounted for those as well.
Yep.
You just made the assumption.
Yeah, I got the replay on it, but I'm sorry, unfortunately out. But I think that's all I had for questions right now, anyway. All right, thank you.
Anyone else while public comment's still open? All right. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 6:50 PM.